They say you never truly know cold until you've been locked out of your own family's warmth. I learned that lesson on a January night in Michigan, 7 months pregnant, with frostbite creeping into my fingers and my mother's laughter echoing through the door she'd just slammed in my face. My name is Oralee Walker, and this is the story of how I turned my family's cruelty into the fuel that rebuilt my life. It was a Friday evening in early January, and Northwood, Michigan was bracing for what meteorologists were calling a historic lake-effect snowstorm. I was 23 years old, 7 months pregnant, and standing outside my childhood home with nowhere else to go. The walk there had been brutal. The wind cut through my thin jacket, and each step through the deepening snow felt like wading through wet cement. My feet were numb inside my worn sneakers, the only shoes I had left after my landlord had thrown my belongings into garbage bags that morning. Frank, my stepfather, had promised to help me with the security deposit for my apartment. He'd looked me right in the eye 3 weeks earlier and said the check was in the mail. I'd believed him because I was desperate and alone, and 7 months pregnant with a baby whose father had disappeared the moment he'd heard the news. The check never came. When I'd called Frank that morning, his voice had been cold and dismissive. He told me I should have been more careful, that he wasn't running a charity, and that I needed to learn to stand on my own 2 feet. Then he hung up. 2 hours later, my landlord changed the locks. So there I was, standing on the front porch of the house where I'd grown up, shivering so hard my teeth rattled. I could see warm light glowing through the windows. I could smell cinnamon and apple cider, the scent of the fancy holiday potpourri my mother Meredith always bought from that boutique store in downtown Detroit. I knocked. At first softly, then harder, more urgently, as the wind picked up and the snow started to fall so thick I could barely see the street. My hands were shaking, and not just from the cold. I was terrified of being rejected, terrified of what would happen to my baby if I couldn't find shelter. The door opened a crack, and my mother's face appeared in the gap. Meredith Walker was 52 years old and looked at least 10 years younger, thanks to expensive skincare routines and twice-weekly yoga classes. She was wearing silk pajamas that cost more than I'd made in a month at my last job at the diner. Her expression when she saw me was one of pure disgust. "Mom," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Please. Frank said he would help with the deposit, but he never sent the check. I got evicted this morning. I don't have anywhere else to go. The storm is getting worse and I'm scared." Meredith's eyes traveled slowly from my face down to my swollen belly, then back up. Her lip curled slightly. "Frank? Don't call your stepfather by his first name. It's disrespectful. And don't bring that filthy appearance to my doorstep and expect sympathy. You made your choices, Oralee. You decided to sleep around and get yourself knocked up, and now you want us to bail you out? That's not how the real world works." I felt something crack inside my chest. "Please," I said again, hating how pathetic I sounded. "I'm pregnant. It's freezing. I just need somewhere to stay tonight, just until I can figure something out. Please, Mom, I'm your daughter." Before Meredith could respond, I heard footsteps behind her, and my younger sister Tiffany appeared in the hallway. She was 19, 4 years younger than me, and everything I'd never been thin. Pretty, popular, with designer clothes that Frank paid for without question. She was holding her phone, and as soon as she saw me, a smile spread across her face. Not a kind smile, a delighted one. "Oh my God," she said, lifting her phone and pointing it at me. "Look who it is, everyone, the star of Northwood's favorite tragedy. This is going to get so many views." She was filming me. My sister was standing there filming me while I begged for shelter in a snowstorm, and she was smiling about it. Behind Tiffany, I could see into the living room. There was a fire crackling in the fireplace. There were stockings hung on the mantel. There was warmth and safety and everything I needed, just a few feet away, and it might as well have been on another planet. "Tiffany, please," I said, looking past Meredith to my sister. "Please turn that off. I just need help." Tiffany zoomed in on my face. "This is gold," she said, talking to her phone now, to her thousands of followers. "The pregnant charity case returns. Should I let her in? Vote in the comments." That's when Frank appeared. My stepfather was a big man, 6'3" and broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that filled a room. He smelled like whiskey even from where I stood, and his face was flushed. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded. "She showed up begging," Meredith said, her tone dripping with disdain. "Playing the victim like always." Frank's eyes landed on me, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Then his expression hardened. "I told you never to come back here," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're useless, Oralee. You've always been useless. You made your bed. Now lie in it." I felt my knees starting to buckle. The cold was seeping into my bones now, making everything hurt. My baby kicked inside me, a reminder that it wasn't just my life at stake. "Please," I said one more time, reaching out to grab the edge of the door. I was crying now, tears freezing on my cheeks. "Please don't do this. I'm begging you. Just tonight. Just until the storm passes." Meredith's hand moved to the door. Our eyes met for one long moment, and I saw absolutely nothing in hers. No love, no compassion, not even real anger, just cold indifference. She pushed the door closed. I tried to hold on, my fingers wrapping around the edge of the heavy oak door, and then I felt a sharp, sickening pain as the door slammed shut on my hand. I screamed. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, shooting up my arm like lightning. I jerked my hand back, cradling it against my chest. 3 of my fingers were already swelling, turning dark. Through the door, I could hear them talking. Meredith's voice was clear and carrying, loud enough that I knew she meant for me to hear. If she and that baby freeze to death out there, at least we'll save money on diapers. I heard Tiffany laugh, that high, tinkling laugh she used when she was performing for an audience. Then I heard footsteps moving away, back toward the warmth and light and safety of the living room. I don't know how long I stood there. The pain in my hand was a constant throb, and the cold was everywhere else. I could see them through the window, moving around the living room. Frank poured himself another drink. Meredith settled onto the couch with a magazine. Tiffany was on her phone, probably uploading the video she'd just taken. They looked comfortable. They looked happy. They looked like a family, and I was standing outside in a blizzard, not part of that picture at all. Asterisk, I need to leave now or I'll die here. Asterisk, I thought, and the clarity of that thought cut through the fog of pain and shock. I turned away from the door, from the house, from the people who were supposed to love me and protect me. I walked down the porch steps, holding my injured hand against my chest, and started walking into the storm. I have no memory of most of that walk. I know I was heading toward Main Street, thinking maybe I could find somewhere open. But the snow was falling so fast and so thick that I couldn't see where I was going. Everything looked the same, just white and more white. At some point, I fell. I tripped over something buried under the snow and went down hard. The impact knocked the breath out of my lungs. Asterisk, get up. Asterisk, I told myself. Asterisk, you have to get up. Your baby needs you to get up. Asterisk. I tried. I got to my hands and knees, but my injured hand couldn't support my weight and I collapsed again. The snow was piling up around me. I thought about my baby, about the little person growing inside me who deserved so much better than this. I thought about dying out here in the cold, alone, and forgotten. I thought about Meredith's words, about saving money on diapers, and something hot and fierce burned in my chest. Rage. Pure, clean rage. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let them kill me like this. I forced myself up again. 1 hand, 2 knees, then 1 foot, then the other. I was standing. I was moving. I could see a light in the distance, just a small glow through the storm, and I focused on that. 1 step, another step, another. The light got closer. It was attached to a small farmhouse set back from the road, with a barn and a fence. I made it to the fence and grabbed hold of it, using it to keep myself upright as I moved along it toward the house. I don't remember reaching the porch. I don't remember knocking or calling out. The next thing I remember clearly is waking up somewhere warm. I was lying on a couch, covered with heavy quilts that smelled like lavender and old cotton. My hand had been wrapped in clean bandages. I was wearing different clothes, a flannel nightgown that was too big for me, and thick wool socks. Then I heard footsteps, and an elderly woman appeared in the doorway. "You're awake," she said. Her voice was gentle, with a slight accent I couldn't quite place. "That's good. You gave me quite a scare, young lady. I found you collapsed by my fence this morning. You're lucky my dog started barking, or I might not have seen you under all that snow." I tried to sit up, but my body protested. The woman moved closer, setting a hand on my shoulder. "Easy now. You've got frostbite on your feet and hands, and you're exhausted. You need to rest. I'm Helen Henderson. This is my farm." "Mrs. Henderson," I managed to say. "Thank you. I'm so sorry to be a burden. I'll leave as soon as I can." She made a dismissive sound. "You're 7 months pregnant and you nearly froze to death. You're not going anywhere until you're well. Now, I'm going to bring you some soup, and you're going to eat it and tell me nothing except your name. Everything else can wait." I ate the soup, chicken and vegetable, simple and hot, and the best thing I'd ever tasted. "Mrs. Henderson sat in a rocking chair nearby, knitting something while I ate, not asking questions or demanding explanations. "My name is Aurelie," I told her. "Aurelie Walker." She nodded. "Well, Aurelie, you're welcome to stay here as long as you need. I have a room above the old granary that's not much, but it's warm and dry. You can stay there." "I don't have money," I said, shame burning in my throat. "I can't pay you." "Did I ask for money?" Mrs. Henderson said, her tone firm but not unkind. "You can help around the farm when you're feeling better, if you want to earn your keep. But right now, you need to rest and heal. That's all." I stayed. What choice did I have? But more than that, I wanted to stay. Mrs. Henderson's farm was small, just a few acres with some chickens and a vegetable garden, but it felt like sanctuary. She didn't ask me what had happened or why I'd been wandering in a blizzard. She just gave me space and kindness to things I'd been starving for without even realizing it. The room above the granary was tiny, barely big enough for a single bed and a small dresser, but it had a space heater and a window that looked out over the snow-covered fields. I spent the first few days mostly sleeping, letting my body recover from the frostbite and exhaustion. Mrs. Henderson brought me meals and made sure I was comfortable. She never made me feel like I was a burden or taking advantage of her generosity. After a week, I started helping around the farm. My hand was still healing, the fingers stiff and painful to move, but I could gather eggs and help with feeding the chickens. I could clean and organize the barn, small tasks, but they made me feel useful, like I was earning my place. One evening, about 2 weeks after I'd arrived, Mrs. Henderson set down her knitting and looked at me directly. "You don't have to tell me what happened," she said. "But if you want to talk about it, I'm here to listen." So I told her. I told her about Frank and his broken promises, about Meredith's coldness, about Tiffany filming me while I begged for help. I told her about the door slamming on my hand and the words I'd heard through it. I cried while I talked, ugly crying that made my nose run and my eyes red. But Mrs. Henderson just listened. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "People like that, people who can turn their backs on their own blood when she needs them most, they've got something broken inside them. That's not your fault, Orally. That's their shame to carry, not yours." "It doesn't feel that way," I said. "It feels like I'm the one who's broken." "There's nothing wrong with you," Mrs. Henderson said firmly. "You're a young woman in a hard situation, trying to do right by your baby. That takes courage. What they did to you, that's cruelty, pure and simple. And cruelty says everything about the person doing it and nothing about the person receiving it." February came, and with it slightly warmer weather. I knew I couldn't stay at the farm forever, living off Mrs. Henderson's charity. I needed to figure out how I was going to support myself and my baby. That's when I heard about the opening at the Northwood Grill. It was a diner right in the center of town, one of those classic 24-hour places with red vinyl booths and a long counter. I'd worked there during high school, and the owner, Ray, was gruff but fair. I walked into town one morning and pushed open the door to the grill. Ray was behind the counter, wiping it down. He looked up when he heard the bell chime, and his eyebrows went up when he saw me. "Orally Walker," he said. "Heard you were back in town. Also heard you were in some trouble." "I need work," I said, lifting my chin. "I know you've got an opening for a server. I'm a good worker, Ray. You remember that." Ray studied me for a long moment. "I can give you shifts," he said finally. "Day shifts mostly, so you can be off your feet before the evening rush. And there's a room upstairs. Used to be storage, but I converted it. It's not much, but it's got a bed and a hot plate. Rent's cheap if you want it." I felt tears prick my eyes. "How much?" "We'll work it out from your paycheck," Ray said with a shrug. "You start tomorrow, 6 in the morning." I started the next day. The work was hard, especially being pregnant. But it felt good. It felt purposeful. I was on my feet for hours, taking orders and delivering plates to truckers and construction workers and the occasional family. My back ached and my feet swelled, but I was earning money. I was taking care of myself. The room upstairs was tiny, but it was mine. I paid for it with my own money. I furnished it with things from the Goodwill and the discount store. A small crib that I assembled myself. A dresser with drawers that stuck but held baby clothes I'd bought on clearance. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd had a month ago. Working at the grill turned out to be more valuable than I'd realized. The place was the center of Northwood's social life, especially for the working-class folks. Everyone came through the grill eventually, and everyone talked. I heard everything: who was getting divorced, who was having an affair, who just lost their job. And I heard about Frank. I heard about him a lot. It turned out that Frank Walker's reputation as Northwood's most successful contractor was built on a foundation of shortcuts and lies. I'd listened to the construction workers who came in for breakfast, complaining about the houses Frank had built. Foundations that cracked after one winter, roofs that leaked within months. Electrical work that wasn't up to code. One morning in early March, an older man came in and sat at the counter. He ordered coffee and eggs, and while I was pouring his coffee, he started talking to Ray. "That bastard Frank Walker still owes me $3,000, the man said, his voice bitter. "I did all the finished carpentry on that house over on Maple Street. Beautiful work. He said he'd pay me when the homeowners paid him. That was 6 months ago. I've gone to his office, I've left messages. Nothing. He's a thief." The man, whose name was Dave, pulled out his phone and started scrolling through photos. "Look at this," he said, turning the screen toward Ray. "See this beam here? That's supposed to be oak. Frank told the homeowners it was oak, charged them for oak, but look at this close-up. That's pine, cheap pine, with some stain slapped on to make it look darker." I was standing there, coffee pot in hand, staring at the phone. "Can I see those?" I asked before I could think better of it. Dave looked up at me, surprised. "Sure," he said, handing me the phone. "Frank Walker is my stepfather," I said. Dave's expression changed, sympathy and something else crossing his face. I'm sorry, kid. I didn't mean to badmouth your family. Don't apologize, I said, scrolling through the photos. He's a piece of shit. Always has been. Can you send me these photos? Dave hesitated, then nodded. Give me your number. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text containing dozens of photos. Evidence, proof that Frank Walker was a fraud and a cheat. I stared at those photos for a long time, an idea beginning to form in my mind. Over the next few weeks, I collected more stories. I'd bring them up casually in conversation, asking people about their experiences with local contractors. Frank's name came up over and over. Bad materials, shoddy workmanship, unpaid bills. I started keeping a notebook, writing down names and dates and specific complaints. I took photos of the photos people showed me. I was building something, though I wasn't quite sure what yet. I just knew that I was tired of being powerless, tired of being the victim. I wanted to fight back. My baby was due in mid-July, and as spring turned into summer, I found myself getting anxious. I was going to be a mother soon. I was going to be responsible for another human being. The thought terrified me, but it also gave me focus. I needed to create a life that was safe and stable, not just for me, but for my child. I gave birth to my son on a hot evening in late July. It was a long labor, 15 hours, and I did it alone except for Mrs. Henderson, who drove me to the hospital and stayed with me the whole time. She held my hand through the contractions and told me I was doing great even when I was screaming that I couldn't do it anymore. When they finally placed my baby in my arms, I looked down at his tiny red face and felt something slot into place inside me. This was it. This was what I'd been fighting for. This little person who hadn't asked to be born into this mess but deserved everything good the world had to offer. I named him Leo, after the constellation, because he was born under the sign of the lion and because I wanted him to be brave. Mrs. Henderson helped me during those first few weeks. She taught me how to change diapers and swaddle and recognize the different cries that meant hungry versus tired versus uncomfortable. Ray told me to take as much time as I needed, that my job would be waiting when I was ready. But even in those exhausting, beautiful early days of motherhood, I couldn't stop thinking about Frank and Meredith and Tiffany. I'd lie awake at night, Leo sleeping on my chest, and think about that door slamming on my fingers, about Meredith's words, about Tiffany's laugh, about Frank's dismissal. The anger hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown stronger, more focused. They'd tried to destroy me. They'd left me to die in a blizzard. And now I had a son who would grow up knowing that his grandmother had wished him frozen to death before he was even born. I couldn't let that stand. I wouldn't let that stand. I started planning in August. Leo was 6 weeks old, sleeping a bit better, and I had time to think clearly again. I went back to my notebook, full of stories about Frank's construction business. I went through the photos Dave had sent me. I started researching, using the library's computers to look up building codes and licensing requirements and consumer protection laws. The plan came together slowly, piece by piece. Frank's business was built on lies and fraud. I had evidence of that. What I needed to do was make sure the right people saw that evidence. The Michigan Licensing and Regulatory Affairs Department, for one. The Northwood Gazette, the local newspaper, for another. But Frank wasn't my only target. Meredith and Tiffany had their own vulnerabilities. Meredith's entire identity was wrapped up in her standing in the community. She was the president of the Church Ladies Auxiliary. She was on the board of the Northwood Historical Society. Her reputation was everything to her. What would happen if people knew what kind of person she really was? I remembered something from my childhood. Meredith had a habit of recording things. She'd record phone calls with her friends so she could replay them later. She'd record the church ladies' meetings. She kept everything in the cloud, backed up religiously because she was terrified of losing data. If she'd recorded anything from that night, it would be there. I called in a favor from someone I'd gone to high school with, a guy named Marcus who worked for a local tech company and knew his way around computer systems. I told him what I needed. He was reluctant at first, but when I explained that it was about protecting my son from people who'd wished him dead, he agreed to help. It took him 3 days to get into Meredith's cloud storage and find the files. She'd deleted them, thinking they were gone, but nothing is ever really gone from the cloud. Marcus sent me a file. I listened to it once, in the middle of the night with headphones on so I wouldn't wake Leo, and I felt ice settle into my veins. It was all there, the entire conversation from that night. Meredith's voice saying those words about saving money on diapers, Tiffany laughing, Frank muttering something about good riddance. It was worse than I'd remembered, hearing it played back like that. Clinical, cruel, casual. I had my weapon against Meredith. Now I needed something for Tiffany. That was easier. Tiffany documented her entire life online. She had Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. She posted constantly. I spent a week going through her social media, taking screenshots. There were dozens of posts where she'd mocked me directly or indirectly. Photos of her new handbag with captions about how some people make smart choices. Videos of her at parties with voiceovers about being thankful she didn't ruin her life at 23. And then there was the video from that night. She'd posted it to her Instagram story, And even though stories are supposed to disappear after 24 hours, I'd managed to find someone who'd screenshotted it. It was horrible to watch. Me, 7 months pregnant, begging in the snow while she filmed and made jokes. But it was evidence. I created a blog. Nothing fancy, just a simple WordPress site with a clean layout and a straightforward title. Asterisk. The truth about the Walker family of Northwood, Michigan. Asterisk. I wrote my story, not with anger or hysteria, but calmly and clearly. I included dates, facts, documentation. I embedded the screenshots of Tiffany's posts. I didn't post the audio file of Meredith publicly, but I referenced it, explained what it contained. I included links to articles about construction defects and consumer complaints. I made sure everything I wrote was factual and verifiable. But I didn't publish it. Not yet. I was waiting for the right moment. I wanted maximum impact. The right moment came at the end of September. I was checking the weather forecast one evening, and I saw it. A major lake-effect snow event was predicted for the first week of January. The meteorologists were calling it potentially historic, similar to the storm that had hit last year. The timing was perfect. Almost exactly 1 year after they'd left me to die, I spent the fall preparing. I compiled my final dossier on Frank's construction business photos, testimonies, building code violations, unpaid bills. I packaged it all up in a detailed report with an index and citations. I made 3 copies. One for the Michigan Licensing and Regulatory Affairs Department, one for the Northwood Gazette, and one for a lawyer who specialized in construction fraud. I prepared the blog post, writing and rewriting it until every word was perfect. I set it up to publish automatically on a specific date and time. I sent the audio file of Meredith to my pastor at the small community church I'd started attending with Mrs. Henderson. I explained the situation and asked him if he could forward it to Meredith's pastor. He agreed. I also sent copies to 3 members of the Northwood Historical Society board women I knew from the diner, who I'd served breakfast to every Saturday morning for months. For Tiffany, I didn't need to do much. The blog would be enough. But I made sure to tag her social media accounts in the posts I made, sharing it. I made sure it would show up in search results for her name. Everything was in place. All I had to do was wait. December came, cold and gray. I was working full-time at the diner again, Leo staying with Mrs. Henderson during my shifts. I'd see my family around town sometimes, Frank driving his expensive truck, Meredith shopping at the boutique stores, Tiffany filming herself at the coffee shop. They never acknowledged me. If we passed on the street, they'd look right through me like I didn't exist. That was fine. Soon, I wouldn't be invisible anymore. The storm forecast remained consistent as January approached. A major system was building, expected to hit the first week of the new year. I set all my posts and emails to go out on January 6th at 2 in the afternoon. January 6th arrived cold and clear, with that particular quality to the air that meant a major storm was coming. The storm was expected to arrive that evening and last through the next day, possibly longer. I went to work as usual that morning. At 1:55, I took my break. I went upstairs to my room, picked up Leo from his bassinet where he was sleeping peacefully, and sat down at my laptop. At exactly 2 o'clock, I hit send. The email to the Michigan Licensing and Regulatory Affairs Department went out first, marked urgent, with all my documentation attached. Then the package to the Northwood Gazette. Then the blog post went live, automatically posting to every social media platform I'd connected it to. Then the audio files to the church leadership. I sat there for a moment, holding my sleeping son, and felt a strange sense of calm. It was done. There was no taking it back now. I didn't have to wait long to see the impact. By 3 o'clock, the Northwood Gazette had posted a breaking news alert on their website, * investigation launched into local contractor Frank Walker, following fraud allegations *. The article was detailed, professional, and damning. By 4 o'clock, my blog post had been shared 200 times in the main Northwood Community Facebook group. By 5, it was over 1,000 shares. People were reading my story. They were seeing the screenshots of Tiffany's posts. The comments section filled up fast. Some people defended my family, but most people believed me. More importantly, other people started adding their own stories about Frank's business practices. Tiffany's social media exploded. Her Instagram was flooded with comments on every post, people calling her out for her cruelty. She tried to delete them, but they kept coming faster than she could remove them. Within an hour, she'd made all her accounts private. But it was too late. Screenshots were already circulating widely. I heard through the grapevine that Meredith had been confronted at an emergency meeting of the Church Ladies Auxiliary. The pastor had called the meeting specifically to address the audio recording. Multiple people had heard it by then. Meredith had tried to claim it was fake, but they'd confirmed it was genuine. She'd been asked to step down from all her leadership positions. She'd refused and stormed out, but the damage was done. Frank's business phone started ringing off the hook. Angry calls from current clients demanding explanations. Calls from lawyers representing former clients. A call from the Licensing and Regulatory Affairs Department, informing him that his contractor's license was suspended pending investigation. I watched it all happen from the diner, serving dinner to customers who were all talking about the scandal. Some of them knew who I was, and they looked at me with new eyes. Not pity anymore, but respect. The storm hit at 7 o'clock. It came in fast and hard, exactly as predicted. Within an hour, visibility was near zero. Ray closed the diner at 8 and told everyone to get home safe. I went upstairs to my room, checked that I had plenty of supplies, and settled in with Leo. I'd planned for this too. I'd bought a generator months ago, a good one, with enough fuel to run for days. I'd stocked up on food and water and diapers. I had flashlights and batteries and warm blankets. My little room above the diner was going to be one of the warmest, safest places in Northwood for the next 2 days. Mrs. Henderson called me around 8 the next morning, her voice urgent. "Oralee," she said, "I just heard from my neighbor who lives near your family's house. Their roof is leaking badly. The pipes burst overnight, no heat. They're in trouble." I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. "Are they okay?" "For now," Mrs. Henderson said, "but the storm isn't letting up. They're going to need shelter. They've been calling around, but no one wants to take them in. Not after yesterday. Everyone knows what they did." "Where else could they go?" I asked. "There's the emergency shelter at the high school," Mrs. Henderson said, "but the roads are impassable. They'd have to walk, and in this storm, that's dangerous. I think they might come to you, Oralee. Your place is close to theirs, and everyone knows you have a generator." I sat there for a long moment, processing that. They were going to come to me. They were going to show up at my door, desperate and cold, just like I'd been a year ago. "Let them come," I said. Mrs. Henderson was quiet. "Oralee," she said finally, "I know what they did to you. I know you have every right to hate them. But I also know you. You're not cruel. Don't let them make you into someone you're not." "I'm not going to hurt them," I said. "I promise. But I'm also not going to pretend that what they did was okay." They came at 2 in the afternoon. I heard the pounding on the door downstairs over the sound of the wind. Urgent, desperate pounding. I picked up Leo, wrapped him in his warmest blanket, and went down the stairs. Through the door's small window, I could see them. Frank, Meredith, and Tiffany, all 3 of them covered in snow, shivering violently. I opened the door. The cold air rushed in, and they practically fell into the entryway. "Oralee," Frank said, his voice hoarse, "please, our house is falling apart. No heat, no water. We need shelter, just until the storm passes." I looked at them, really looked at them. Frank's face was red and chapped from the cold. Meredith's perfect hair was plastered to her head. Tiffany was crying, mascara running down her face, her phone clutched in one hand even though there was no signal. "Please," Meredith said, and I'd never heard her say that word before. "Not to me. We'll die out there. We have nowhere else to go." I felt Leo shift in my arms, and I looked down at him. He was watching me with those serious baby eyes, like he knew something important was happening. I thought about what Mrs. Henderson had said. About not letting them make me into someone cruel. I thought about the person I wanted to be, the person I wanted my son to grow up seeing. "Come upstairs," I said, "but I'm not doing this because you deserve it. I'm doing it because my son is watching, and I want him to learn that we don't leave people to freeze to death, even when they did that to us." They followed me upstairs in silence. My room was small, too small for 4 adults and a baby, but it was warm. I'd set up the generator in the storage closet next door and run an extension cord to power a space heater. The difference between my room and the cold outside was stark. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the small couch. They sat, huddled together. I got them towels and handed them over. "Dry off." They did, not speaking, not looking at me. When they'd gotten some of the snow off, I went to my mini fridge and pulled out some water bottles and some leftover soup from the diner. I heated the soup on my hot plate and handed them each a bowl with a spoon. "Thank you," Frank mumbled. "Don't thank me yet," I said. "I want to talk." "Oralee, please," Meredith started, but I held up my hand. "You're going to listen," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You're going to sit there, in the warmth that I'm providing, and you're going to hear what I have to say." They went quiet. Tiffany was still crying softly. Frank looked like he wanted to argue but didn't have the energy. Meredith's face was carefully blank. "1 year ago," I said. 1 year ago tonight, almost to the hour, I came to your door. I was 7 months pregnant. I was desperate. I'd been evicted because Frank promised me money and then didn't send it. I had nowhere to go and a blizzard was coming. I asked for help. I begged for help, and you slammed the door in my face. You slammed it on my hand. I held up my left hand, showing them the scars on my fingers. You broke my fingers. And then, Meredith, you said that if I and my baby froze to death, at least you'd save money on diapers. Tiffany, you filmed me begging, and you laughed, and you posted it online for entertainment. Frank, you called me useless and told me to lie in the bed I'd made. I continued, my voice steady. I walked nearly a mile in that storm. I collapsed in the snow. I would have died if Mrs. Henderson hadn't found me. My son would have died before he was ever born. Because of you. Because you decided that your comfort and your pride and your cruelty were more important than my life. I'm sorry, Meredith whispered. I'm so sorry, Orly. Are you? I asked. Are you sorry for what you did, or are you sorry that everyone knows about it now? Are you sorry that you lost your position at the church? Are you sorry that your friends turned their backs on you the same way you turned your back on me? She didn't answer. She just looked down at her hands. I turned to Frank. Your business is over. The state suspended your license. Your former clients are talking to lawyers. All those people you cheated, all those corners you cut, all those bills you didn't pay, it's all coming out now. You built your success on fraud, and now everyone knows it. Frank's jaw tightened. You did this, he said. You destroyed us. No, I said. You destroyed yourselves. I just made sure people saw the truth. Everything I revealed, everything I shared, it was all real, all factual. If you'd been honest, if you'd been kind, if you'd treated people with decency, there would have been nothing for me to reveal. I looked at Tiffany. She was staring at her phone. And you, I said. You built your whole identity on being perfect, on being better than everyone else, on mocking people who were struggling. Well, now everyone sees who you really are. How does it feel? Horrible, Tiffany said, her voice breaking. It feels horrible. Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted? What I wanted, I said, my voice rising slightly, was for my family to love me. What I wanted was for my mother to open the door when I was freezing. What I wanted was for my stepfather to keep his promises. What I wanted was for my sister to care more about me than about her social media followers. But I didn't get what I wanted. So instead, I made sure you faced consequences for your choices. The room was silent except for the sound of the wind outside and the hum of the generator. Leo started to fuss, and I bounced him gently, soothing him. You can stay here until the storm passes, I said finally. I'm not going to throw you out into the cold, but when this is over, you're going to leave, and you're not going to come back. You're not going to ask me for anything else. You're not going to try to be part of my life or my son's life. You made your choice about what kind of family you wanted to be, and now you get to live with it. Orally, Frank said. We're family. You can't just cut us off. I can, I said. And I am. You cut me off first, remember? You made it very clear that I wasn't family anymore, that I was an embarrassment and a burden. Well, fine. I don't need you. I have Mrs. Henderson, who's been more of a mother to me in 1 year than Meredith ever was. I have Ray, who gave me a job and a place to live when no one else would. I have friends at the diner who treat me with respect. I have Leo, and I'm going to make sure he never feels the kind of rejection I felt from you. I moved to the window, looking out at the storm. It was still going strong, snow piling up in drifts that reached halfway up the first-floor windows. You're safe here for now, I said, but the moment the roads are clear, you leave. They spent the night in my room. I gave them blankets and pillows, and they slept on the floor while I kept Leo in bed with me. It was awkward and uncomfortable and filled with tension, but no one froze to death. No one was in danger. I kept the generator running and the heat on, and I made sure they had water and food. But I didn't comfort them. I didn't tell them it would be okay. I didn't pretend that this moment erased everything that had happened. I just kept them alive, because that was the right thing to do, and because I wanted to be the kind of person who did the right thing even when it was hard. The storm broke the next afternoon. The snow stopped falling, and the wind died down. The town slowly started to dig itself out. Ray called to say he was reopening the diner the next day, that the road crews were working to clear the main streets. Time to go, I told my family. They gathered their things without argument. Meredith looked like she wanted to say something, but I shook my head. Don't, I said. Just go. They left. I watched from my window as they walked down the street, 3 figures struggling through snowdrifts, heading back to their damaged house. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not guilt, not anger, just emptiness where they used to be. Mrs. Henderson came by that evening to check on me. She brought a casserole and sat with me while I fed Leo. How are you feeling? She asked. I'm okay, I said. I think I'm actually okay. No regrets? She asked gently. I thought about it. No, I said. I stood up for myself. I made sure there were consequences for what they did, but I also didn't let them freeze. I proved I was better than them, and that's enough. Mrs. Henderson nodded. You did good, Orly. You did real good. The aftermath took weeks to fully unfold. Frank's construction business collapsed completely. The state revoked his license permanently after their investigation confirmed widespread fraud. Several of his former clients sued him, and he ended up settling out of court, losing most of his savings. The fancy house started to fall apart without proper repairs, and eventually they had to sell it at a loss and move into a much smaller place on the other side of town. Meredith lost all her social positions. The church, the historical society, even the country club where she'd been a member for 20 years. She became persona non grata in the social circles she'd valued so much. I heard she'd tried to start fresh at a church in a neighboring town, but someone there had seen my blog post, and she'd been quietly asked not to return. Tiffany's influencer career was over. Brands dropped their partnerships with her. Her follower count plummeted as people unfollowed in droves or stuck around just to leave negative comments. She ended up getting a regular job at a retail store in the mall, which, for someone who'd built her identity around being special and glamorous, was probably its own kind of hell. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. But then I'd remember that night in the snow, and the feeling would pass. As for me, life got better. Ray promoted me to assistant manager at the diner, which came with a raise and better hours. I was able to move into a bigger apartment, still above the diner but with 2 bedrooms so Leo could have his own room. I enrolled in online classes at the community college, working toward a business degree. I figured maybe someday I'd open my own restaurant, something honest and good where people would want to come. Leo grew. He learned to smile, to laugh, to crawl. Every milestone felt like a victory, like proof that we'd made it, that we'd survived and were building something good. Mrs. Henderson babysat for me, and she loved Leo like he was her own grandson. She taught him nursery rhymes and showed him how to collect eggs from the chickens and knitted him sweaters for the winter. I made friends at the diner and through the church I'd started attending. Real friends, people who knew my whole story and liked me anyway, people who showed up when I needed help and let me show up for them in return. I learned what healthy relationships looked like, and it was nothing like what I'd grown up with. About 6 months after the storm, I was working the lunch shift at the diner when Meredith came in. She was alone, dressed simply in clothes that looked like they came from a department store rather than a boutique. She looked older than I remembered, more worn down. She sat at the counter and ordered coffee. I poured it for her, my hands steady. She looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Vulnerability, maybe. Or regret. "Orly," she said quietly. "I know you don't want to talk to me. I know I don't have the right to ask for your time, but I need to say something." I waited, not encouraging her but not walking away either. "You were right," she said, "about everything. What I did to you that night, it was unforgivable. I've spent the last 6 months thinking about it every day. I lost everything, and I deserve to lose it. But the worst part isn't losing my position at the church or my friends or the house. The worst part is knowing that I lost you and that I threw you away when you needed me most. I was your mother, and I failed you completely." She took a shaky breath. "I can't undo what I did. I know that. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. Not because of the consequences, but because I hurt you. Because I said those terrible things and did those terrible things, and you didn't deserve any of it." I stood there, holding the coffee pot, looking at this woman who'd given birth to me but had never really been my mother. Part of me wanted to accept her apology, to offer forgiveness, to try to rebuild something, but a bigger part of me remembered everything too clearly. "Thank you for apologizing," I said finally. "I mean that, but I don't think I can have you in my life. Maybe someday, but not now. The damage is too deep." Meredith nodded, tears running down her face. "I understand. Can I at least see Leo? Just once? I want to meet my grandson." I thought about it. I thought about Mrs. Henderson's words about not letting them make me cruel. I thought about Leo, and what kind of person I wanted him to grow up to be. I thought about the difference between being kind and being a doormat. "No," I said. "I'm sorry, but no. You said you wished we would freeze to death so you could save money on diapers. I can't let someone who said that about my child be around him. Maybe if you do the work, if you really change and prove over years that you're different, maybe then we can revisit this, but not now." Meredith nodded again. She left money for the coffee on the counter and walked out. I watched her go, and I felt sad. But I also felt strong. I'd set a boundary. I'd protected my son and myself. That was what mattered. Frank never apologized. I'd see him sometimes, working construction as a regular laborer now instead of a boss, and he'd look away, ashamed or angry or both. Tiffany tried once to reach out through social media, a direct message saying she was sorry and asking if we could talk, but I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, aren't meant to be rebuilt. A year after the storm, almost to the day, I was home with Leo on a Saturday morning. It was snowing lightly outside, nothing like the blizzard from the year before, just a gentle winter snowfall. Leo was 2 years old now, talking in short sentences and getting into everything. We were building a tower with blocks when he looked up at me and said, "Mama, you sad?" "No, baby," I said, smiling at him. "I'm not sad. I'm happy." And I really was. I'd lost my family of origin, but I'd built a new family, Mrs. Henderson, who we visited every week, Ray and the other staff at the diner. The friends from church, the community of people who'd rallied around me and supported me. I had a job I was good at, a son who was healthy and happy, a future that looked bright. I'd survived the worst thing that had ever happened to me, and I'd come out stronger on the other side. I'd stood up for myself. I'd demanded accountability. I'd proven that I wasn't useless or worthless or any of the things Frank had called me. I was capable and strong and worthy of love. The storm that had tried to kill me had instead forged me into someone new. Someone who knew her own worth. Someone who wouldn't accept cruelty or abuse or neglect. Someone who would fight for herself and for her child. I looked out the window at the falling snow, holding my son close, and I felt peace. The storm was over. The sun was shining. And I was exactly where I needed to be. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what I did, if I think I went too far in exposing my family. The answer is no, I don't regret it. They made choices, and those choices had consequences. I didn't destroy them. I just made sure the truth came to light. If the truth destroyed them, that says something about the foundation they'd built their lives on, not about me. I think about that night in the blizzard sometimes. I think about the girl I was then disparate and broken and begging for help that never came. I'm not that girl anymore. I'm stronger now. I'm wiser. I know that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up for you. It's about who treats you with love and respect. It's about who would open the door instead of slamming it. Mrs. Henderson is family. Ray is family. My friends are family. And Leo, my beautiful boy, is the family I created, the one I'm going to raise with kindness and boundaries and unconditional love. As for Frank, Meredith, and Tiffany, they're just people I used to know, people who taught me what I don't want to be. People who showed me that sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away and build something new. The storm came, and it tried to destroy me, but instead, I became the storm. And when I was done, I was the one left standing warm and safe and free, with my son in my arms and my whole life ahead of me. That's enough. That's everything.